You can be with us today. Today we start our series of talks by our baccalaureate residents. The baccalaureate residency invites artists who have finished their undergraduate degrees to take classes at the Kirk Newman Art School, to use the studios to continue their own art practices, and to help with classes in studio management. The residents will have their own exhibition opening on May 5th, and we invite you to see their completed works during that exhibition. Today, three of the residents, these are our first three that are presenting, they'll be showing some of their previous work and the projects they're currently working on preparing for their exhibit. First, we have Rosalind Apolka, who is a painter. Rosalind received their BFA with an emphasis in painting from the Gwen Frostic School of Art at Western Michigan University. They currently teach at Western Michigan and hold a place on the board of the Kalamazoo Book Arts Center, in addition to the Kirk Newman Art School residency. They've been working on paintings that describe interpersonal relationships. Hank Matson is a painter and printmaker who moved to Kalamazoo from Salt Lake City. He has a BFA in studio arts from Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. And he came to explore the possibilities of intaglio printmaking. He's been working with intaglio techniques of mezzotint and aquatint to create abstracted forms of the human figure, and also combining those with other printmaking forms. Kaylee Karastis is a digital and traditional artist who explores themes of nature, texture, surrealism, and experience. Kaylee is the first digital artist in our baccalaureate program, so that's been very interesting, but she is also working on an installation piece. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Western Michigan University. So I hope you enjoy learning about the techniques and practices of these residents. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Good afternoon. My name is Roz or Rosalind, whatever fits nice in your mouth, however it works out for you. So happy to be here. And I know we just realized that all of us are here for the artist talks, and we all have fun socks. So there's a little rhyme for you this morning. We've gone over that. That's my name. This has been such a fantastic residency. So far, I've taken a lithography class, a felting class, painting class, as well as currently in a jewelry class, and have also taken an acoustic class too. So lots of workshops, lots of different experiences that I've been able to have here at the Kirk Newman Art School. Something that I've been really appreciative of in this residency specifically is the fact that coming from an academic setting. So I graduated from WMU in 2020. Just before WMU closed down for the pandemic was my senior show. So this was quite a culture shock coming from deep academia, a bachelor's degree, but academia, and then immediately getting hired as an instructor at Western. So I've been really steeping in this academic soup for quite a few years. And the culture shock by coming to the KIA, everything is a little bit slower here. Everyone's still just as serious about their art practice and learning things and education, but it's a little bit slower. There's no grades. There's no, if you miss a class, no one flips out. It's a little bit slower and a little kinder, I'd say. Not that the academic experience isn't fantastic and excellent. There's merits to both, but the residency here, in my experience, has really been a time to slow down and take stock of my artistic practice and figure out where I want to go from here. So a good, I'm losing the word. A good moment to sit and think is what I would call this residency. Up here is a little, he's upside down, but this is a little octopus from the casting class with Danny Giancastro. And then to the left from an encaustic class. These flowers up at the very top are actually dried flowers that I had at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, if anybody's familiar with the camp. I worked there for two years, and those are flowers that I had pressed and dried. So a lot of my practice has to deal with the connectedness of people. And that is, I think, adamant in my work, not only intimately here, but with discovering the form and how bodies can interlock in ways, whether that's in a romantic way or a platonic way. And then just a little aside up there, there's some bone folding tools created in the class here as well. So a lot of explorations happening. A couple more encaustic pieces. To the left, this Ode to Bats is very fantastic. I'm going to read it out loud because my younger sister sent it to me and I had to put it in a creation. Bats, you have never tried to take my money or smack me in the kneecaps. And for that, I am grateful. Bats. Getting into my artwork. So these are some pieces that I've created in the past years. So in my undergraduate. So this is doubled over on the left and Hello Beautiful on the right. These are watercolor paintings on paper, and these are the jumping off points of my work that I'm working on at the KIA right now. So these are investigations of relationship to self over time, after a certain event in somebody's life. For example, the one on the right, and I do have her permission to share this story, is my friend Jax, and she's a transgender woman. So in the back, you can see pre-transition Jax and post-transition Jax. And that is an ongoing thing in her life that she's happy to share with people and be a representative of the trans community. And she allowed me to capture her and what she feels is her most true self. So that was back in 2020. And this is a group of paintings that I had let to rest because I had to work on a senior exhibition for my undergraduate degree. So these I kind of put to the side. Doubled over, however, was in the West Michigan area art show here at the KIA, and I did get 4th place. So I got some positive reinforcement for this body of work back in 2019. And I knew that I laid it aside and I wanted to bring it back. This was a more recent work. This was created in 2022 for the faculty show at Western Michigan University. So this is another investigation of not only the overlapping form, but relationship to self and folks' relationship to either their bodies or how they're perceived. So you can see this big orb in the middle. None of these folks have a face. It's all just a body. So what do we hold inside of our bodies? Who are we? And how do we represent ourselves in this sphere of blankness? So you can put yourself into this piece if you really wanted to, or if you felt connected to it. And if not, that is okay. No worries. This piece is called BCBD. And I put this little blank slide here, partially so you folks can look at me, because first of all, I love the attention. Second of all, can you look around the room just briefly? Just at other folks. Maybe you came with somebody here. Maybe you know somebody here. Just think about your relationship with them and maybe about a story of how you met, a moment that you've shared with them, something connective that you've done with somebody near you or in this room. If you haven't, that's okay. We're having a connection right now. You're learning a little bit about me. I'm learning a little bit about you because you're responding to some jokes. So I'm figuring out, what the vibe in the room is. So my work now has been morphing into less about a relationship with self, a relationship with who you think you are and how you interact with the world, and more of how people come together. Because I think people are really, really important. I'm an instructor and I can see that when folks come into class, and as an instructor, if I don't treat them like people first, they're not going to be in a good place to learn. So they're not going to be responsive, receptive to what I'm going to say or any ideas that I want to share with them. So in that teaching practice helped me realize that connectivity is very, very important to me. And if you treat people like people, for example, if somebody comes into class and isn't ready to learn, I want to figure out what's going on with them, if it's appropriate for them to share, if they feel comfortable with me, to have that connection and get them to a place where they're ready to be in class, ready to be seen and feel heard. And with that comes stories. So when I asked you to think about the connectivity of you and other folks in the room, these stories are now what I'm trying to bring into my art practice. So what we have overall, I just said a lot of words. Overall, connection with others, the stories that you have with other people, and making people feel seen. So that's like 3 little things right there. How I do this is with these overlapping watercolor forms, choosing colors that I feel represent the people that I'm painting and having conversations. So for example, if you know 2 of our amazing front desk workers out there, Jaden and Krista, this is how I get my reference pictures. So I asked them both very nicely if they could stand for me, if I could paint them. And what happened during this image taking process was I would ask them questions about their relationship, how they met. They did mention that they're like work spouses. So, everybody's kind of got somebody they're connect with at work, whether that's a friend, coworker. Sometimes coworkers become friends outside of work, all that good stuff. Just that evolution of a relationship is what I'm really, really interested in. So I had them talk about their relationship for about 8 to 10 minutes, just long enough so it like gets a little uncomfortable, and then they look at each other and be like, well, what is people start to like look at each other and really, what is our relationship? Who are we to each other? What level of friendship are we? Really thinking about stories and things that you can share. So these 2, obviously it was very fun. There was a lot of giggles. They were sharing some excellent stories with me. And it was just such a good time. So these are only a few of the reference pictures. But then I take that and I overlap these images and create a more amalgamated reference picture. And then it comes out a little bit like this. So this piece is unfinished. I've got a little bit more work to do on Krista because Jaden is taking over the painting a little bit right now, just because I've spent a little bit more time on their face so far, and that's okay. We'll come back. But this is I would say about 75% done. So I really enjoy leaving the whiteness of the page come through to really continue that transparency of the watercolor. That's why I keep it as a medium. And it almost looks like a double exposure in photography. But the reason why I'm not using photography is because I think that painting adds this intimacy, right? I am now taking your portrait and creating it and spending hours on it, noticing these tiny little things, noticing how people's noses curve, eyebrows curve, the indentations, freckles, dimples, all that good stuff. So it's me also creating intimacy with these folks that maybe I know really well, maybe I don't know so well, but that's why that's why painting is the medium that I'm choosing for these. So there's Krista and Jaden. And then this one is also unfinished. This one's probably about 80% done. I've got to add some nice eyelashes. But this is actually a really lovely story. This is my mentor on the left, Adrienne Little. She's involved in Kalamazoo stuff and Western. So if you know her, she's the one with the Parker the poodle, if you ever see her out and about. She is my mentor. I like to call her my art mom. And this is Sylvie. She's a French artist, a French-Canadian artist, and she is Adrienne's art mom. So I don't know Sylvie. She passed before I was able to know Adrienne and able to know her. However, it creates almost a line of matriarchs for me as an artist, because I have my mentor and I have my mentor's mentor. And this is very much an ode to their relationship and how their relationship probably cultivated how Adrienne treats me and how she's pushing me through life in a mentor position. So this is a story that is also very much important to me as well, but I'm not in it. But there's almost this matrilineal line happening here. I have two other pieces that are in what I like to call the ghost stage of work. This is where the watercolor is very, very light. I'm putting on only the lightest washes, so they wouldn't show up very well on here. But I do have another story that I would love to share with you if you come to the exhibition, especially the opening, talk with all of us residents. We're all pretty cool. There's two other pieces that I'm planning to create. One is an image of my grandfather and my friend connecting over a really, really intense experience that they both had in their lives. And the very last one is about two Kalamazoo natives who actually didn't know each other. And then both of them separately went to China, found each other, fell in love in China, and had their first child in China. And then moved back to Michigan and now live in Kalamazoo. How crazy is that? So it's all of those human connections, those relationships that I'm interested in investigating and creating all of those stories in portraiture. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, or cries of outrage? Happy to take those as well. Yes, Courtney.
How do you choose the colors of your work?
How do I choose the colors of my work? Fantastic question. So when I'm choosing the colors of the folks, first I'm thinking about the color of the paper. The ones that you folks saw were mostly white. I do have some like cooler tone papers as well. I'm choosing the colors based on how they will interact with the paper, as well as what colors I think really represent the people. So it was actually very cute with Jaden and Krista's. They actually had like a little sketch that they were doing of each other, like a little caricature sketch. And Krista was always red and Jaden was always like a green. So I think that my color assumption there was pretty good. That doesn't happen all the time, but it's just a feeling, an emotion that I get from talking to folks. Thank you for your question. Beautiful. We love the smiling faces. Well, thank you folks so much. Deb, do you want me to introduce Hank or are you going to introduce Hank?
You can introduce Hank.
Fantastic. So thank you folks so much for having me. I super appreciate your attention. Yes, I'll take applause. I love it. Thank you. And I would like to introduce our next artist, super fantastic, all around 10 out of 10, Hank Matson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hank Matson. Kind of did some introductions already, but I'll go through it with you again. So I moved here in October from Salt Lake City. This is the first time that I've ever really lived or been in the Midwest. I've seen Indianapolis twice before moving here. So I'm very new to the area. I spent my whole childhood in the Southwest. And yeah, just came here looking to escape the Southwest and also to find new artistic opportunities. And the Kirk Newman Art School residency is really what brought me to Kalamazoo. So I'm very excited to be here, and I've focused pretty much my whole life around doing this residency at this point. So it has been a great experience. So yeah, I got my bachelor's degree at Northern Arizona University. And during that time, I did a study abroad in Siena, Italy. And there I was able to go to Florence and different surrounding cities and explore a lot of the museums there, which I'll come back to later in my talk. But I had a really great time, being able to just get fully immersed in Italian art. And yeah, I'll come back to that. So I graduated in 2014, and since that time, I've just been pursuing art on my own. I haven't done any residencies, any schooling since then. So this is really my first time going back to any type of structured art making within an institution since 2014. And that has definitely been interesting transition going back to class schedules and critiques and that kind of thing. I was just out of that practice for a long time. So that has been, just a very big transition for me. I moved here in October. So one thing I'd like to point out, I'm one of the printmaking residents, but I actually haven't done very much printmaking since 2014. Printmaking requires a lot of studio space. It requires generally like a very expensive press, a lot of materials, and a workspace that has access to good ventilation because you're using things like nitric acid to create your images. So since 2014, I haven't really done very much printmaking. And during that time, I've been basically doing oil painting and acrylic painting. But these are just two examples of some of my recent oil paintings that I've done. So I've always been drawn to figurative artwork and being able to abstract the figure. I don't know, I enjoy that you can kind of cut the figure apart and collage it and change it all around and morph it in any way you want and contort all the shapes, and it still looks like a person. And you can even read emotion into the way that you contort figures, even though it might look nothing like a natural person in the end. It still is such an immediately readable subject, which I really like, because I really enjoy experimentation in my artwork, and having a subject that is so easily recognizable through whatever experimentation you want to throw it through is really nice. So those are some of my oil paintings. And here's a look back at some of my printmaking from 2013 and 2014. So during my undergraduate degree, I was mostly focused on relief printing and intro to etching. So on your left, that's a reduction lino cut that I did during my senior year in college. And that's actually a self-portrait. And then on the right is a line etching that I did. It's a zinc etching. So this is kind of the last printmaking work that I had done since, in the last decade. There were occasional times where I would print at home doing different lino cuts because those are a little bit easier to do at home. But I definitely took a long break and focused on other artistic pursuits. So the residency includes access to classes while you're here. So I took photogravure, lithography, screen printing, and also just focused on intaglio for my own projects. But those are all different printmaking techniques that I had never tried before, and so it was really fun to be able to just learn more about printmaking. And I took some just fun exploratory classes as well. So tapestry weaving was really fun because I've never done any type of fiber arts, and that was a lot of fun to just find a new way to make images. And same with image and clay. That's what these two examples are from. It was really nice to work with my hands more. A lot of the work I had been doing was like very detail-oriented etching, which just is all detail. And it was really nice to be able to work with clay and have that outlet to work with clay and just use my hands in my artistic practice. And I also took figure drawing open studio here, which has been a really wonderful class to take as well. So just to kind of go more in detail of what those processes are. So the one on the left, that's a photogravure. And that one is actually an oil painting that I did several years ago. But through the process of photogravure, you're able to take images and transfer them to etching plates and print them as printmaking. And so that was a really cool technique to learn. I've always wanted to find a way to reproduce my paintings in a way that still maintains the art object of the reproduction as opposed to just a photocopy. And I found that photogravure was a really cool way to be able to reproduce paintings, but still maintain like that artistic quality and like objecthood of art that is so important to art. And then this middle one is a lithograph. And that was something that I had never had any experience with in college. And that was a very difficult and interesting class to take. That one is from the reference for it is from the figure drawing class, and I've learned more techniques for transferring images to plates. So that one is also like similar to photogravure. It's a photocopy of one of my figure drawings that I was able to then transfer to a lithograph plate and print. And then the one on the right is a silk screen, and I'm currently in that class, but that was also another form of printmaking that I had never had the opportunity to try before, and I've really enjoyed that one. I'm definitely like a drawer and a painter in a lot of ways, and I've really enjoyed with silkscreen how there was no in between. Like a lot of printmaking processes, you have to like sketch your image, kind of transfer it into like what looks like a printmaking technique, and then transfer it to a plate and do all these different things that kind of separate the original image from the final image. But with silkscreen, you're able to just draw with India ink onto a transparency and create a silkscreen print that's exactly what your drawing was. It was really fun to be able to really let my drawing and just like the ink work that I was doing to let that shine through printmaking. It was very freeing, so that was a fun print to do. And then primarily for my independent study work here, I've been focusing on intaglio. As I said, in my bachelor's degree, I took some intro to intaglio courses, but I really only scratched the surface of what intaglio has to offer. So I've been really wanting to get back into trying intaglio techniques, and intaglio specifically is very difficult to do from a home studio. So taking all these classes and having access to the studio space here has been extremely important for me to be able to experiment with that. So on the left here, I have something that's called mesotinting. And this is a laborious process where all of the darks that are in the figure, like all the dark tones, those were all created by hand tooling a piece of copper until it was so textured that the ink, maybe I should back up and maybe introduce how you do intaglio. So you texture a plate of copper, you texture it all over, sorry. So yeah, you texture a plate, ink it up, and then you polish it back. And anywhere that the polish or anywhere that's smooth will be polished out and there won't be ink. Anywhere that has texture will grab the ink. And that's how you produce an intaglio. So in order to have a dark image like this, you have to do a lot of texturing because that's what's grabbing the ink and printing the final product. So with this technique, I'm texturing the entire surface of the copper plate, so textured that it just prints black, and then working from black to white. So all of the areas that are white or lightened at all, those have all been physically scraped off the surface of the copper and then polished down to white. So it's a very laborious process, but it gives you these really rich, interesting colors. They're almost like velvety in tone. So that was a really fun process to try. And then the middle one is just a 2-color etching. So that I just never had any experience trying to print in color with intaglio, and the studio here has all the colors, and I was able to just experiment a lot. There's actually like maybe 6 or 7 versions of that middle print, all in just different colors and different variations. And that's been a really fun thing to be able to experiment without any need to like sell this as a product or something, just trying to play with the techniques that I always wanted to play with. So that is the color etching. And then on the far right, that one, I've been able to experiment even more. I don't know, in the studio, kind of just ideas come to mind of how I can create new textures, and I just try them. So with that one, I actually used contact paper and cut out stencils and then spray painted the plate in different ways. And the spray paint acts as a masking fluid for the acid that is texturing the surface of the plate. So I was able to get all those little dots and stuff from the spray paint, and using the contact paper, I was able to do kind of like stenciled, like very hard linear lines. And then you can see as well that I did some of that scraping and polishing back on it too, to get some of those lighter tones. So yeah, it's been really fun to kind of just experiment, like have the tools at hand and the time set aside to just try new things and see where it takes me. So, and then figure drawing, I mentioned that I was taking the figure drawing open studio class, and that has been a really super positive experience for me. I, for years, was taking figure drawing classes weekly prior to the pandemic. I was going every single week, and it informed a big part of my practice. But when 2020 hit, all of the figure drawing classes were closed. And during that time, my art really drifted away from the figure, just because I didn't have the reference material. It wasn't close at hand. And my art really drifted toward more abstraction and like landscapes, just things that I had access to during the pandemic, which was a fun place to go. It was my art, but it got very boring after a while. So I was very happy to come here and have access to a figure drawing class. It was the first time I had since 2020. And so that has been really nice. I feel like it's revitalized my love for art, because the human figure is just something that I love to express and, I don't know, use in my art. So that has really been helpful. And that, keep an eye on that bottom middle face. I was able to use the photogravure technique to take that drawing as well as the one on the right to reproduce actual figure drawings in printmaking techniques, which has been really fun, because with printmaking, a lot of the times you have to use scribes and different tools that have their own unique look, but it's hard to get brush work or pen work lines with printmaking. But with this photogravure process, I was able to, like with the image on the right, able to get like very much like a quill pen look in etching by using photogravure. So that was a lot of fun. So I've done a ton of experimenting and tons of tiny little pieces. Like almost all of those images you saw were 4x6 or 5x7, very small, tiny experiments. So most of the work that I've done could be shown in a large space, but I need to frame it really well. And so I wanted to have something that would be a little more of like a showpiece, something that I guess is more show-stopping than just a bunch of tiny little pieces on the wall. So I've been planning this piece here. It's for scale, it's 22 by 30 inches, which is the largest sheet of like standard printmaking paper that you can get. So I'm trying to use the full sheet for a single print. And this is just kind of like the preliminary sketch here. So like it's kind of my own notes on the project. But on the left, you can see it's a figure who's holding a coin, and behind her is a skeleton who's kind of reaching around, smiling, about to snatch the coin out of her hand. And down to the right of her, there are different figures who are kind of contorted and toiling and doing their different things. And then in the kind of gap between her arm and her head, there is a little home on the range kind of thing. So I'll get into more of what all that means, but that's the essential imagery there. And then on the right, you can see, so that's the same drawing, but I've laid the actual zinc plates that I'll be etching down onto it. So you can see I've carved out or grinded out a bunch of zinc plates to etch. So it'll be a 22 by 30 inch sheet of paper, but it will be a composite image made of many different plates. So wherever there's orange, that will be etching. And then the figure will be done with lino cut. It'll be a multicolor lino cut in the center with etchings around the figure. And I just wanted to come back to the whole Italy thing. I just wanted to kind of point out some of my influences as far as like figurative work goes, particularly with this image. When I was in Italy, I had the opportunity to see a lot of the Italian mannerists, particularly Pontormo. And there's just something about like the weightlessness of their forms, and they almost seem like they don't actually have any skeletons or structure to them. The artists were able to use the human form in almost like a flowing rhythmic way that I really enjoy and wanted to emulate. And there's a large focus on like hands as a form of expression also in mannerist art. So I wanted to see or use that in my own printmaking. So the image on the left is actually a silkscreen that I did kind of in that form, which was the initial inspiration for the larger piece. So that one, from this small piece came the like, oh, I want to play with doing a similar kind of figure, but with a different background, do it on a larger scale. And instead of silkscreen, really try to use the techniques that I learned in etching to reproduce it. So just wanted to point out some of my influences. And here's another one too. I just love the flowiness of all of it, and like the kind of attention to the forearm, the weight of the hand, and they always seem to be asking you something too, like the way that a lot of them will be just like staring you down, the paintings, and I really like that aspect of it, and that's something that I want to incorporate into my image, because they seem to be asking you to like really take a look deeper, and like as you're passing the image, you kind of have to stop and meet that painting eye to eye, and that's something I want to try to do with my work. And on the left here, that is a small lino cut, kind of working on some of the composition of what the final one will be. I wanted to do some small lino cuts to get some preliminary sketches. So this is going more into the imagery of it. So I almost exclusively never use like particular symbolism. I try to be intentionally vague with all of my art, but occasionally it just naturally becomes like not that way. And this is one of those where, as I was doing the sketch, like I started with just a figure and started to just brainstorm what could the figure be doing. And so I ran into like, well, she can be holding a coin, and then what can be going on in the background. So this one really came about naturally, but really ended up having, I feel like, pretty particular symbolic meaning. So this is a little sketch as well. So the one on the right is a skull that's not going to be in the final piece, but I wanted to explore some more textural elements with intaglio. So that is just kind of a test piece to see what textures I could get. And that's the kind of direction I'd like to go with the skeleton, at least in the image. So the whole, I feel like the symbolism of this piece is kind of the trivial nature of wealth and kind of like our striving after wealth, and how particularly as an artist that affects me. But the skull and the kind of hand reaching around, it kind of might be hard to tell, but there's a skeleton hand reaching around to grab the coin. I just feel like it's kind of portraying that money and wealth aren't really ours to keep. They're always fleeting, and there's always, like, you can hold money in your hand, but it's always going to be taken away from you. And so you can see I've started to do some etching on the large plate in the bottom right, and this is the actual zinc plate, a photo of it. You can see that it's reversed in printmaking. Everything is mirror imaged, so that's why it's the exact opposite. But these are the figures that are kind of toiling and striving. You can see the one below is more in a toiling position, while the person in the middle is kind of like covering their face in trying to hide the truth of the cycle of wealth that we're all stuck in, kind of just covering up their face and not refusing to look at it. And then the person above is like, has their fist in the air in triumph, because I also want to highlight that there are often like financial triumphs in our lives, but it's very cyclical. We kind of go through that stage of toil, refusing to look at the situation, sometimes having a triumph, and then it goes back to the same thing. And then, so the little home on the range between her arm. This one, I thought was just it was interesting to me to juxtapose serene peacefulness amongst all the like the skeleton and the toil and all of that, to have like, this is the dream of security, really, having a home that's quiet and serene. And I included like a little bunny in there too. It's like, this is like the dream of security and having your own place to just be, and like to have a family and to just separate from all of the woes of wealth and the striving. So I wanted to include that. And I feel like too, something particular to, I guess, working artists is that something that I've really come into contact with is the reality that we don't make a lot of money, and there's a very real possibility that I may never own a home in the countryside or have the money to have children. And I wanted to really highlight that that is a part of my personal struggle with wealth, is that I want to create art, but it doesn't really always create a sustainable living situation. There's often a choice between security and creating art as a full-time profession. So I've done a few color studies because this is going to be a really large piece. I don't want to do all of my color studies on a gigantic piece of lino cut. So I've done a few studies, I'm going to do a few more, but this print is probably about that large. Just workshopping how I'm going to do the colors in the center of the print. And something I've been playing with a lot in the silkscreen class is layering 2 colors to create a third color. And that's something that I really want to try with this. So you're essentially printing 2 transparent layers over each other, and where they overlap creates a third color, which is your key image. So all the darker areas, that's not printed on its own block. That's just where the 2 colors overlap. And that's just a fun printmaking technique that I really enjoy. So I want to try to challenge myself to do that with this print. But so far I'm really leaning toward the one on the right, doing a very like warm color palette for this piece. And the sepia color that I have on that one on the right, I think would be really nice mixed in with this one here. Something I wanted to point out also, this is very unintentional, but after cutting out all the zinc plates, I realized that the home on the range is shaped very much like Michigan. So I thought that was interesting, and that was unintentional. So yeah, so these are the color studies, and this is kind of just in conclusion. I hope you come to see the final piece, by the way. I have a lot to do, but I hope you come see it. So there was a little sneak peek of it. But yeah, this residency has supplied me with like the space and equipment and just time to really focus on techniques that I've always wanted to try, that I've been really, like for the last decade since leaving an institution, wanting to really push into these, and it's given me the equipment and time to do that. And I've been able to learn new techniques that I don't think were even available at my universities. Like photogravure was not available at my university, so that was a really cool resource to have. And then friendship and community. Like I've moved here in October from Salt Lake City, and for the first month I was here, I moved here alone. And so it was really, really wonderful to have a community to land in, especially a like-minded community. So the KIA has definitely been that for me. Yeah, given me the time to really set aside time to do this, because I think I had the opportunity to do some printmaking at home, but forcing yourself to be in a residency or a place like this really makes you like stopping like, oh, I'll make one print this 6 months, and really forces you to set aside everything else you're doing and just focus on your new practice. So that has been really wonderful. And it's also allowed me to build a large portfolio of work, which I don't know where I'm going to next from here, but I would definitely like to still continue to pursue printmaking. And this is, yeah, with all the experimentation I've done, I have a much larger printmaking portfolio to share with people. So And that is my talk. Any questions? Yeah, so the question was, did I study much Italian? And yeah, the program I was in was actually an Italian language intensive was the main thing. So I think I got 9 credits of Italian in 4 months. So it was like 9 to 3, 5 days a week, we would just study Italian. And we had Italian host parents too, who didn't speak English. So it was definitely an Italian language intensive.
When you first started working with figures, did you know right away it was something you always wanted to explore, or was it sort of a soft kind of getting introduced to figures then falling in love with them?
So the question was getting into figure drawing or figures a like soft transition or like something I always knew I'd want to do? For me, I think my transition into figures kind of came from sketching faces a lot, like in high school and that kind of thing. I was always just drawing faces for years and years. Like that's all I would do is just draw faces. And I don't think I really added limbs to any of them until maybe college, like around like the time going to Italy and then doing like a couple figure drawing classes here and there in college really opened me up to the possibility of how much more you can portray outside of just focusing on the face. And that was really, I don't know, I guess that was really cool for me to be able to do that. So I think it was a slower transition. But I've always wanted to portray people and always been drawn to portraying people generally. But I think using the figure as a means of expression has been a slower process.
For your final piece, there's like the little hole that has the homestead in it. In your color study, there was some ink that was in that. Are you in that hole already? Are you going to try to leave, when you do the screen printing, are you going to try to leave that hole completely open, or will there be some overlap between the ink that is already there and then the next one?
So will there be an overlap of the second print on top of the etchings is what you're asking?
Yes.
I don't intend for there to be. And it's something I have to figure out because for etching, I have to soak the paper. So this is a technical thing I'll have to figure out because the paper will shrink after I print the etching on it. And so I'll have to plan how to layer them in a way. So I'll do the lino cut separate after the etching has already shrunk the paper. But I don't intend for them to overlap. Well, thank you. Up next is Kaylee. I'll pass it over to her.
Hello, everybody. So I just wanted to provide a content warning for my installation piece. It's going to include maternal passing and fatal disease. So just there for you. So after I graduated from Western with Bachelor of Arts, I hadn't created art for a while and I kind of fell out of my relationship with that. And due to the lack of resources and materials, times, and frankly money, I hadn't been touching traditional forms and mediums that I really loved, such as printmaking and painting, etc. And so I decided to get saved up and got Procreate, which is a digital drawing app, which includes really accurate and really beautiful brushes, such as paints and watercolors and inks, etc. So I was able to start working into this new medium that was quite new for me, yet trying to incorporate, the mark makings and such from traditional forms of media into digital. So that's how I ended up being here, wonderfully enough, as a digital resident. So these are some of the courses that I wanted to take throughout my time as a residency. I wanted to provide and cultivate a balance and relationship visually between two-dimensional work and three-dimensional work. So I'd taken techniques in animation and Procreate, the app that I had mentioned previously, sculpture, block printing, image and clay, and intro to Procreate. This was one of the lovely pieces that I made in my block printing class. So this is where I started. It sort of was the catalyst again for me in igniting that, oh wow, this is intentional mark making that I was really missing. And it's really lovely to see that again and what it means to physically connect with your piece. And this again is just further delving into the concept of cultivating a visual relationship between 2D and 3D. So this was a concept in print that I had made digitally with a 6B pencil. And this is executed in a 3D form in ceramics, which I thought was really exciting and really lovely to think about. Okay, so what does dimension mean for me, and how do I include this and sort of build this with myself and texture? So it definitely was intellectually stimulating and challenging. So this is a personal piece that I've done. I should have titled it, but it's called Object Permanence, where a lot of the objects within this piece do not know that the other one exists. And so this, again, is further working on the concept of mark makings from traditional expressions and putting that into my digital work. So this, I'm still incorporating and building my portfolio as well and really pushing the boundaries. What is digital media? What elements can I provide in there that really makes you question as a viewer? And this is, again, all digital work too, and experimenting with color blends and effects, etc. And that was another, and again, big goal for me was just expanding my professional and personal portfolio throughout this residency. So these are just a couple more personal pieces that I've done. Again, the 6B pencil is one of my best friends. And alongside of that, just seeing, what kind of work is coming innately for me, and also what work is harder for me to create, and what work is a little easier than others. And I find myself really resonating with just abstract forms, and also taking aspects of just the human experience, textures, etc. Some more pieces here. So for my installation process, prior to being a resident, I never had the experience and the ability to have a piece within a space that was designed for you to be able to, have something there. So I never really pushed the boundaries of what I wanted to make, and I was always sort of accommodating towards what's marketable and what works for just selling my work right now. And I had always wanted to touch on, again, a lot of the concepts that mean a lot to me emotionally, and like trauma, especially in my work. But I always had a hard time visually conveying that. I just always kept hitting a wall with that. So for me, I kept stepping aside and saying, okay, I'll just keep doing abstract because I love how vague it is. I love that it's subjective. Yet for this time, I wanted to really push myself and be incredibly ambitious and say, okay, I have the space. I'm being encouraged to do this. So why not make something that really pushes myself as an artist, that kind of makes me question things the entire time, that makes me bleed and cry, and it's just, I want it to be cathartic. So I wanted to do and decided to do a piece about the tumultuous maternal relationship that I had with my mother, who deceased when I was the age of 19 from Huntington's. So it's a fatal neurodegenerative disease that every offspring is 50 chance of getting. And so I ended up testing positive in 2020 from it. This is such a malicious disease, being that it just sort of strips you and your identity of, mentally, physically, emotionally. You just sort of end up as a husk, and it's really just obliterates you, basically. So my mother had passed away at 50 years, and I watched her degradation for over a decade. And one of the particularly frustrating aspects about it is her dementia, that I realized that she had forgotten me at the age of 14. And so that resonated pretty heavily in being, okay, so what does identity really mean to all of us? And what does it mean to have a vessel And what does it mean to exist in the relationships that we have with our parents? And what does it mean to just digest abuse and digest that trauma, even from a maternal figure in my life? So thus, I had created this piece, and this was just the initial concept for me. I wanted the two figures to be separated in the end and really have a sense of negative space. I wanted some tension and whatnot, but given that this was a digital piece, and also with the opportunities that this residency was presenting, I was like, how can I take this further? How can I really push this as a concept and make this into a successful piece or something that is completely unique for me? So I decided to make this into a linoleum carving print onto canvas for two separate pieces, and I wanted to sew, for the first time, thread connecting the figure of my mother and I. So I'm basically digesting and being fed all of the trauma and the disease. So it's changed quite a bit, but this is the initial concept. So this was just the first stages of it. I had a projector in my little studio and was just figuring out spacing and, sizing, etc., the relationship of that. Fortunately, it's a little hard to see, so I apologize for it, but this is the carving as well. And throughout this, I found myself very appreciative. It was very laborious, and I did accidentally cut myself a couple times, and it was really, it was a lot, but it was really wonderful and cathartic, and I found myself just really resonating with the pieces more heavily than I even initially realized at first. It was just carving every single mark. Every single mark I was like saying something, and every mark I was saying it's not your fault, and every mark I was saying it's okay and I understand. So it was pretty therapeutic. And so then thus the printing process onto the canvas, where I was really happy to see some lovely noise that came naturally through the process. I was happy with as well, just having them floating in the void. And then this is me preparing the canvas, getting them into sort of scrolls with clamping the woods, etc., and folding everything back, making it look pretty neat. And this already is sort of just solidifying my concept and thus making it exciting just to see everything, coming to fruition. And this is the very beginning threads that just, these images are so intimate. They are so beautiful to me. And it's very delicate, and that's what I really wanted to convey, was a sense of delicacy, but the dichotomy of this tension between her and I. And then this is where it's currently at. And of course, I plan to finish everything as a whole. And so my mother is on the left side here, and I'm on the right. And of course, these two are on the floor, which they won't be when they're done. They're going to be hanging up on the wall. So I look forward to seeing a lot of just gravity working with the threads in this piece and providing a really beautiful visual connection and conversation and tension and texture and just how it takes up space. So I'm very excited to see this in completion, and hopefully anybody else that wants to join for our show May 5th. Everybody else is doing really wonderful work. I'm very, very thankful for this process and to have been here. So in conclusion, this residency has provided me with ample knowledge with traditional mediums and digital mediums. Explore and discover what my visual identity is with abstract and literal compositions. Expand my portfolio with a variety of work. And of course, connecting with a vibrant and thriving local art community. And thank you. Are there any inquiries, perchance? Yes, Courtney.
You said that when you first started working on the print that it resonated with you a lot. Did that have anything to do with your relationship of working digitally versus in-person manual prints and stuff? Did you resonate with it any more doing it by hand, or was it sort of all together?
Yeah, so the question is, did it resonate with more with me doing it digitally or by hand with that first print? And I would say it definitely resonated more doing it physically. I think, again, given that this is tied so strongly to what it means to have a vessel and the fact that I can physically make art right now until I cannot, which I don't know when I will be able to. So I think that for me, again, just reinforced what it means to physically be able to, and also the privilege it takes and what it has to be able to make art and physically connect with it. Hopefully that answers that question. Yes.
And maybe this is premature, but since you have your little blank blocks, do you envision maybe making other versions of this artwork because you will be able to if you want to, or printing them singly or using them for other purposes? Like could you continue this as a series if you wanted to, or find some other ways to use your blocks again?
Yeah, great question. So it's just about continuing my work as a series if I wanted to. And that's yes, absolutely. I think given the fact that I was learning a lot, again, sewing for the first time, fighting with that the whole time, I think that I've just begun. And it's for me wanting to explore this over time. And, I've obviously made some mistakes and I know now what I want to be able to do again in the future. So I hope that by doing more of a series, then I can start more of a bigger conversation. And I hope to someday do a gallery show somewhere. Yes.
Was most of the work that we saw on the screen digital work of your first part of your presentation?
Yes, most of it was. Yeah, there were just a few watercolors in there. Thank you.